I'll just start working. We'll see how this goes. Oh, there we go. Now I can see how many people are here. Okay, so now that we have a few people in here, actually I should mute my mic, or mute my Twitch actually, so I don't hear myself echoing in my ears, because that drives me insane, and then I stutter all over myself. It's kind of a weird effect. Okay, so I have been working on some icons for weapons, as many of you saw yesterday, because we teased a little tweet about it. So I'm going to work on that a bit. And this kind of brings us to one of the big, design problems, let's say. It's not a problem, it's just like a puzzle to solve, is what should the weapon types be? Because our system is probably too powerful. So we can basically make so many different weapons that would actually feel fairly unique that it's like, should we have hammers? Like the question that Kurt, our animator, and I were just talking about a minute ago is like, should we have some hammers that essentially behave like pole arms? So you've got the character, and usually they swing a hammer, and here's like the character's hand, and the hammer goes bam right here in front of them, right? So that hits this zone right in, essentially like right in the tile in front of you. But would it be worthwhile to then also do some hammers that have a long pole and hit something like 2 or 3 tiles away from you? Obviously, this would be harder to use. It's possible to do in our system. Would be kind of cool to have this sort of long-range hammer. Or we were talking about, like, maybe this should be a flail, so this would be like a chain link. So you could swing and pow, hit right here. But then it leaves us with some other questions. So, like, if that's how flails behave, what kind of weapon would we have to fill the niche of basically, starting with something here and swinging around in a big circular arc with the 360 spin attack, so it hits everything in this zone? I mean, that seems to make a little more sense for a flail, right? Or you could have a flail that starts here and ends in that same place. So it would do this kind of pattern. But I mean, basically you want to, in terms of like having unique weapon mechanics, there are things like projectiles that you can add to them and things like that. But since our game is so physics and parameter based in terms of like different weapon sizes, how they rotate, how you swing them, it makes sense to try to fill every niche. So you want a weapon that basically starts small and arcs out like this. Kind of like a sword but longer range, because your normal rogue sword will do something kind of like that. So the question is, what is this weapon? What is this weapon? What is this weapon? And then, like, how can we boil that down into a specific sort of broad weapon type that seems visually and mechanically different from other weapons, such that we could actually call it something different? So yeah, basically, like, and you guys will probably have, as usual, better ideas than I do. But what Kurt and I were talking about is that this weapon right here is probably how whips would work. They start, close to your body, and then kind of like whoosh, swing out like that, and they would have like a little effector, which could either be, a braided leather lash like so, or they could be, say, a chain link, with a little blade at the end that attaches. So the same motion could work for, whips and chain lashes, and they would all just kind of fall into this here's my whips category with the icon for it. Those are just two different variants. This is the first one I did, and that's the second one. So this I kind of like this one better, so that's probably gonna stay as it is, or at least similar. I might change a few of these a little bit as we work. So some of these could be on the chopping block, on the cutting room floor. Some of this might get changed. I've actually got to add a couple, so this isn't, as usual, things I show on here aren't completely canon. So I'll catch up on comments really quick here. So actually going to be a fan weapon. Yeah, I'd like to do fans. They will probably be kind of a later down the road weapon. But it would be really cool to be able to do like a 360 spin or something with like this giant kind of war fan made out of blades. Let's see, Spirit Flask, yes. We've got a Spirit Flask and a Merc Vial here. Seems to be no gauntlet that is actually a giant metal clump. So yeah, actually, gauntlet was something I wanted to add, and I had just started. Basically, I duplicated hand tools here. So we're actually going to turn. I'm basically splitting hand tools into. This will become claws, and this will become gauntlets. Which really they'll work about the same. The only difference is like one does crushing damage, and the other does piercing or slashing damage. So, and that's kind of the other parameter. Is like basically your major things for weapons is what is my attack pattern, what in terms of like how I get swung around the character, various arcs or thrusts. What is my range? So, the difference mechanically, so to speak, between a sword and a whip, even though they have the same pattern, is that the swords will only hit in this area, while whips will hit in that area. And obviously, they'll have different randomized parameters and stuff too. I mean, you might have swords that throw fireballs, but a whip that throws the fireball is a little out there. I mean, oh hey, Andrew Dewar, awesome. How are you doing? I miss my doers too. They're little doers to hang out with now that I have not met. So hope you guys are doing well. But let's see. Okay, so someone asked about katanas and then the bard. So yeah, we've got instruments, which I generically did a music instrument here because they may be guitars, drums, things like that. And so katanas are going to go in the fine swords category. So I was trying to come up with a slightly separate category that could cover katanas or various like Chinese sabers, things that are a little more interesting. So if some of this is like crazy plans I have for like a much bigger Delvers game with more classes and things like that. So this weapon system is maybe a little bit big for this game. So we could end up cutting like fine swords, fans, brands, tablets, magic lamps. Like a bunch of these could go away, but I'm just making the icons right now while I'm thinking about it because these go pretty fast. Favors and occultics probably going away. I would like to keep instruments, even though we're not doing the bard right now, or maybe not at all. Could come out in an expansion or something like that. But anyway, so what I'm going to try to figure out today and kind of work on icons for these is between our kind of three major, I guess 4 major kind of weapon parameters. So we've got attack pattern or sweep. So whether it's sweep or thrust or whatever. Then we've got range. Then we've got projectile, which is really just like, do I shoot a projectile or not? What was my 4th? So, and I guess damage type, sorry. Let's put that up here because that might actually be the most important. So damage type. So crushing, slashing, etc. So really, we want to try to, out of the matrix of all of these things, try to make a weapon that fills basically every niche. So someone was just mentioning a digital vinyl record player, a record player weapon for the bard that distorts reality. Okay. Uh, Maybe I shouldn't have said that because it might like doom us to make it if I mention it out loud. So, okay. So since I'm super scattered, let's go back to this. Okay. So we said like this point swords, that point probably whips. What is this? I was thinking probably a flail. Like a chain flail. So the little chain lashes with like a fine chain and just a tiny blade at the end, those would be whips, just like leather whips. But flails are going to be like, big, heavy, massive chain with a giant spiky ball on the end kind of thing. So then we're left with, well, what is this thing? Like, is this a polearm? Do we call it a long hammer? I mean, I think it would look cooler if it's actually like chain links with a big wrecking ball at the end. So I thought about just calling it like wreckers or wrecking hammers or something like that. So I wanted to see what you guys thought. So I'll wait a second and see if you guys have any ideas or preferences. There will be other polearms, like more like slashing or stabbing polearms. So I was thinking that polearms would kind of hit this area, so a little bit different from whips, which would do more like this wedge shape, or well, I guess they're both wedges, but this whips would kind of spiral out, where polearms would like stab out and rake across. And so these would be, something more like a halberd. Like that, having a little bitty axe head, where these would pound into the ground, so they would need to either be a ball or look like a big kind of hammerhead. So Morningstar, like I did some research into to Morningstars, and I always thought Morningstars were a kind of flail, but apparently a Morningstar is actually like a really long mace. So it's basically just like a mace with a bunch of spikes at the end, like this, at the end of a pole. So because I would have just called them Morning Stars probably. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like the term wrecking ball or wrecking hammer. I mean it's something like, it's not a real weapon name, but it does make it pretty distinct. So I can just call these pole arms, and call these wrecking whatevers. And the difference being like this has a whole sweeping area here, and that being a single strike point. And so we don't have pole arms that do either this or this, and you have to like read or test it out. I mean, there's something to be said in roguelikes for like you have to kind of try weapons out to see how they're going to be used. But since we're a real-time action game, I don't want players to have to test every single thing. Like, you should be able to pick something up and know more or less how it's used or what kind of effect area it has, but maybe its range is a surprise. So Kusari Fundo, I don't is that what the Kill Bill weapon is called, or is that something different? I would prefer to stay away from like names that are like very, very Japanese or very, very French, because our world doesn't actually have a Japan or a France. But so Meteor Hammer is like the literal translation. Okay. So that would be kind of cool. So Meteor Hammer, or what about, actually that makes me think, what if we just called it a falling star? So all possibilities. I will jot these down in one of my spreadsheets really quick before I forget. You guys may or may not be able to read stuff in here, but this is basically my list of, and I'll squish this over so you can see if you want to get it out of the way of my little video feed there. But the major kind of blue bars with the light blue text are like those are big broad categories. So the like very short range gauntlets, claws, things like that are this category is just for organizational purposes in the spreadsheet. And then like gauntlets here would correspond to an icon. So these kind of lighter teal bars are like a category, and then there are a few like subtypes within. We wouldn't actually list this anywhere in the game. You would just have like you might have a cestus or you might have a gauntlet or whatever, but they would all kind of fall into this cestus category. Or like if something has actual brass kind of knobs or knuckles, it would fall into the knuckles category. The reason these have to be separate separate templates, I guess you would say, in the spreadsheet, is that there are a few properties that we have to set in this specific sheet, which is the weapon category sheet, which just says weapon cat down here at the bottom, as opposed to weapon instances, which would be an individual dagger, for instance. So it inherits a bunch of stuff from daggers here in the category sheet, and daggers are a type of knife. So I was thinking daggers and hunting knives are two like very slightly different, variants on knives. The idea I had was that daggers are for stabbing, hunting knives are like very short slashing. I might drop one of those. Like I said, some of this is still like I would like to get this locked in this week, but yeah. So. So is there going to be early access or pre-orders on Steam, was one of the questions. And we would like to do that. It'll probably come later on when we're like at a true beta state, because once we put it on Steam, it's you're bringing in a much bigger section of the market, and so the game is so early. Like I'm afraid that we would maybe scare some people off if if it got loose on Steam right now, where like all of you and all of the people on the forums and Kickstarter kind of understand like, hey, the game is still like a very early kind of alpha state. So yeah, when we deem it like true beta, we will probably check on getting onto early access on Steam. But you can actually pre-order right now on our website if you're interested in playing the alpha. It's actually the address is in the bottom corner of the video feed here. I'll move this so you can read it a little better. It's just delversdrop.com/preorder. So. And yeah, thanks for dropping that in the comments too. Okay, so I was going to note those ideas. Let's see. Where are my flails? So actually, this would kind of be a new category. So I'll just leave some space in here. So we've got flails and So we had Falling Star, Meteor Hammer, and what else was there? Wrecking Ball. And I will just put a note here to pick one, because there's no point in those being separate weapons. So, yeah. Okay. So we got flails, sledges, whips. I think that was all we were talking about. So later I'll put some notes over in here as to what animation state and kind of range and everything they have. I'm going to copy the drop down, not the pick one. So yeah, these actually have a drop down here where you can choose what kind of animation type they would use. So this would actually use the overhand type. That's kind of the definition of those, where a flail would actually be a 360 spin. And a whip, we decided, I believe, will be arc. So, There you go. So that's the major difference between these three, even though like visually they'll look kind of similar. They're all on a chain or a lash or something. Meteor Hammer was in Gundam. I used to watch some Gundam actually, like back in high school. I think Gundam Wing was on Cartoon Network back then, and then there was Gundam some number I forget now, which was I kind of liked that series actually. It was like Gundam Zero something or other. Okay, so what weapon types are for sure getting in? What one besides the music category are you hoping? So oh yeah, 0083 like was the Gundam show. So okay, so let me circle the for sure weapon types since we're kind of going into crazy land here. So for sure going to have knives. Actually, we'll do this. So these are rogue weapons. I should probably make this a different color because I'm not sure how well you can see it. There we go. Okay. Rogue weapons. So if these are claws, those are probably going to be assassin. Whips will for sure be Beastkeeper. I think these grapnels in here is something I would really like to do for the assassin. So basically give him a ranged option. So grapnels would be something that behaves pretty similar to well, they would behave kind of like a spear, but they would actually be on a chain. So you'd throw them straight out, or maybe use the overhand strike. But they would actually have some slightly different, some other like bonus properties. So they might actually work kind of like the sledge, but obviously they wouldn't do like gigantic crushing, kablooey area of effect sort of things. So the assassin has one more. Where did I move that to? I moved it like right before the stream. Is well, basically there needs to be one more slot in here for killing tools. So those are our assassin weapons as well. So I will draw those in a minute. And that's basically like they'll be pretty similar range wise to claws, very short. But they'll be like essentially like size or other kind of little like a comma bladed sort of thing. So yeah, talk about those in a minute because that's actually what I wanted to draw today was those last couple weapon types that I left off. Let's see, who are we missing? So obviously hammers go to the gladiator. And this these new kind of falling stars or whatever we end up calling them would also be gladiator because they work like a long range hammer. Now there would be certain weapons that and so, sorry, backing up 1 second. Someone mentioned arm blades. The claws are going to work kind of like arm blades. I mean, they'll all sort of look like the same thing, like attached to the hand or the forearm. But they also might look like claws on the fingers. So I can basically vary the graphics a little bit. But I could, yeah. But they'll all fall into that claws category. So get back to that in a few minutes. Let's see, the guns, and we've got a few types of guns that just behave slightly differently, would be musketeer, I can't spell, contraption is the harlequin. Right now, the wand is the sorcerer, but I would really, really like to do the spirit flask thing for the sorcerer. And what I was going to say a second ago was that all classes will have several weapon types that they're kind of better than average at. So the sorcerer would be able to use wands pretty well, but they may still be limited use. So we might shift the sorcerer around a little bit. He will still have a ranged attack. The spirit flask will basically shoot these kind of like spirit projectiles that'll also have some elemental effects and things. They'll mostly be either muddle or arcane magically, but yeah, so it's really just a kind of stylistic or lore-based difference, because the idea is that the sorcerers are these kind of drunks that that drink these like actual spirits inside of a bottle. So who are we forgetting? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Elementalist would be Staves. And I feel like am I still forgetting someone? Probably not. Yeah, so that's 8. Okay, so we got everybody. So yeah, all the circled stuff, is actually less than half of all the weapon types being primary, which I think is kind of good for for a roguelike. But of course, we'll have to weight it so that whenever you're in a dungeon, the like as a rogue, you will find more of the rogue specific weapon types. So that's going to be handled on the data side. So yeah, you will find weapons that are kind of in your wheelhouse. You'll obviously find a few that aren't. So the rogue can find some guns, and she might be really bad at them. Like it might recoil really badly and knock the rogue backwards, or might like misfire, or the angle may kind of jitter a little bit. So you try shooting straight up, and it's like 5 degrees off. There are some things like that I would like to. So like some weapons you're actually bad at, you can still use them. It's just like you probably won't do much in terms of killing enemies, unless you just get really good at it. So anyway, okay. So I had a few things I needed to add here. Need to differentiate flails from these falling stars, or whatever we call them. So actually this image looks a little bit more like the falling star idea than a flail at this point. So probably need to make this part smaller and make the actual head of it bigger. So I'm doing all of this in Photoshop just because I draw much faster and well, basically like feel like I come up with ideas better in Photoshop than if I did it straight in Illustrator. If I did this in Illustrator, everything would be very boxy and samey. So I try to like I used to do that way too much, and I think made a lot of the stuff I worked on in Illustrator look kind of just rigid. So I try to draw by hand first, or well, by hand on the computer anymore, but so falling star, and maybe for flail, since we talked about doing a 360 spin with it, we'll do an arc kind of like this for the chain. And then we'll change the head of it out to some kind of a ball. It's a really bad circle. I could just use the circle tool, but kind of like drawing circles sometimes. I'm weird like that. So they still seem fairly similar. Um, I mean, I could really just draw like a straight line for the falling star here. I still want it to look kind of flexible, but I mean it's going to look fairly different from the hammer even still. Um, so let's go with making this even bigger. So it's obviously like a giant sort of pounding weapon. So Doomspeaker had a question about how to compose claws out of 3 different parts, and I'll actually get to those in just a second. Um, there's something I don't entirely like about the falling star still. Like, it doesn't seem like you're pounding down with it, which I would really like. So the other thing I could do is something like take this hammer and kind of convert it into the falling star shape. Or let's try this sort of thing. Maybe we would remove that. This could kind of work. I don't know. That should probably be flipped, actually. It's not really doing it for me. I don't know. We'll leave that for a minute and work on a couple other things, because you guys probably don't want to watch me like fiddle for the entire hour or two of the live stream. Okay, so I needed to do killing tools, which are assassin weapons. Let's pull up my little sheet here and see what I had written down. So I had a few different things. Killing blades, which would be kind of like commas or other hooked blades. Killing needles and killing batons, which would be a bit more like nunchucks or nunchaku. I was thinking that it would be kind of cool to make all of these look like they're attached to a chain. It would just be a very, very short chain. But it's going to be tricky for us without making a new spine file, which Spine is our animation software. So I may have to think about that a little bit more. I mean, really, having a chain on it would just be for like to make it seem cool and different. Really, I want the assassin's weapons to be very, very short range. So he, or she rather, is much more of a glass cannon. Like you've got to get up in an enemy's face and claw their eyes out without getting hurt because you don't actually have any shields as an assassin the way we have it set up right now. Like you can't pick up shield pieces or carry a shield at all. So that was part of the reason I also wanted to do the grapnel to give them a slightly ranged option. But it wouldn't be as long range as a spear, and it would be a little bit weak. So you could just flick, like kind of chip away at enemies with the grapnel, and then like whack them with your killing tools. So let's figure out what these should look like. Oh, and by the way, the color stuff, I actually started coloring all of the what we call the effectors. It's basically the pointy or the crushy bit of the weapon, and I just didn't get to the rest of them yet. So all of these might end up with red or some color, but so. So I might just do something like this for now to show that it's kind of like, could be a little dart or could be something like a sai, a comma, a nunchuck, anything like that at the end of like a little bitty short chain. Or maybe to make it more unique, we could put like a little hook or something on here. Well, as for throwing daggers, there will be these are the throwable weapons, so we've got thrown, slashing. The thing with those is, like, since you're obviously throwing them, or thrown piercing could be needles or darts or daggers. Since you're throwing them, it doesn't make sense to give the assassin an infinite supply. So what we might do is do something with their special ability, where like, if you charge your attack, you simultaneously throw a dagger. Or if you trigger your special ability, you do like a rain of throwing stars or throwing darts. So these would be items that any class can potentially pick up. Assassins might find them more, but that's what I've been thinking about. Just because, like, we could give them an infinite supply if they find shurikens, but it also kind of goes against wanting the assassin to be like this up close and personal fighter. So I don't know. Not really liking that too much. I mean, we could just I could do something like that, or maybe turn it the other way so it kind of resembles a sai. I mean, these would come in all different shapes, but they would all kind of have the same function. I mean, that does make it look fairly distinct, and actually a little bit like the grapnel idea, so I might do something kind of like this, just so you can tell, like, grapnels with the wavy chain means like it's a longer kind of lashing tool, and this with like a little bitty short chain or almost like a haft here, could be several different things. And it has obviously a larger blade, but you kind of recognize this shape as the assassin shape, so same thing there. I kind of like the idea of making this a little more, making it point out a little bit more so it's kind of claw-like, because then I could make the claws look like this as well, and we'd have all three of the assassin weapons looking very similar in that respect. So I mean that makes it seem fairly distinct from knives and so on. So I'll probably leave that for now. Grapnel is good. Okay, so let's talk about the hand weapons. Um, let's see. So fire hooks. Yeah, so there could be the ones I did on Kickstarter. I still want to do. They were more like actual commas, where um, we would. I won't do a separate symbol for this, but basically in the game, these could have all different kinds of hook shapes. So they wouldn't all follow the exact same pattern. The only similarity between all the killing tools would be like handle here, little bitty chain, and some doohickey with blades and shit on the end of it there. Actually, sorry, I probably shouldn't curse on this stream, but so yeah, the one I did on Kickstarter, I think was it was basically this kind of thing. So I mean that it still would follow like a very similar pattern to this. Like this hook was probably a bit larger. So yeah, you could have a weapon that looks like that goes in that same family, and it would have this icon. But weapons will come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, we might have a knife that has a blade like that, or like this. Who knows? So, yeah, so we basically need to split hand weapons into some kind of crushing gauntlets versus slashing claws. So, what I have here just kind of looks is basically supposed to be knucks with spikes on the end. So, So I'm just changing it back to black so I can just think more about shape as opposed to kind of where the colors go and things like that. Gonna get rid of these spikes because the spikes would be more of a claw thing. So, Doomspeaker had asked about the distinct parts of either a gauntlet or claws, and I'm basically thinking that so the grip is always non-randomized for any weapons, like because the grip gets turned off when you're holding it. Basically, we just have like if this is the character glove and the grip goes here, we just turn the grip off, and so you see the weapon's guard and blade above and the pommel below. But then we turn it back on when when you're not holding it, so the hand goes away. So basically, for gauntlets, I was thinking, okay, so if the hand goes here, we'll basically just make a kind of something like a wrist guard, and then something that actually covers the hand, and then the claws or whatever on top of that. So those would really be the three separate parts. So we typically call this the effector. Like basically whatever reaches out and whacks the enemy is an effector. Just to kind of universalize the names of these pieces. And then the names for these would probably be guard, and I guess I would call this the butt, just because these are our, like I said, standard weapon pieces. So the butt on here would be the pommel. The whip would not have a guard. This would be the grip. This guy would not have any grip, or he wouldn't have a haft either. And this is the haft on this on the whip, and the effector would be the little link, or the little spearhead type of thing at the end. So those would be the 3 parts here. This guy would obviously have 4 parts, but they all kind of use that standardized naming system. So I'm probably going to follow the same sort of pattern here, and make this out of 3 parts. Let's see, that was that size. Yeah, I probably need to keep this that big. I wanted to make it a little bit smaller so it looks more like a hand, but I think we need it this big so I can fit claws on the, well, fit claws on the claws. Just have room to draw the literal claws. So then I probably need something here that looks like a thumb, so you can tell. So it's going to be a little boxing glove-ish. But then I'm thinking about, what do we put something up here or some kind of knuckles on it to differentiate this a little bit more from claws. But I was also thinking for claws we could do something similar, but just make the hand open. So basically claws would be this. Need the thumb to probably stick up a little more. Looks like a little baby thumb. Photoshop is freezing on me for some reason. Well, what are you doing, Photoshop? Actually, I'm going to pull these down just a little bit. Just make them even with the thumb there, probably. So those look pretty dangerous. Kind of like that. And it follows the pattern that of the rest of the weapons. Like, it looks like the icon goes with everything else. So I kind of want to put something else on here, like I was saying. So I might just do... Let's save this over to the side for a second so I can do this little trial run here. That looks kind of funny, but I was thinking something kind of like to actually show like literal knuckles. I mean, that does start looking, it's kind of weird, but it looks a little bit more like a gauntlet as opposed to just a boxing glove. I mean, I could also do just negative space like this. I'm going to kind of run out of room quickly, but just have dots for the knuckles. I mean, nothing else really does that. I mean, I guess like the swords have the sort of fluting in some of them, so it's not without precedence. Um, so yeah, maybe that'll work. And on this guy, we should probably just angle the thumb so it looks more claw-like as well. Actually going to stretch both of these upward a little bit. The bad thing is the claws are actually now pretty big in the circle, while the gauntlet is somewhat smaller. So I might actually just enlarge the fist of the gauntlet, because it is going to be bigger, kind of like a cestus, or it could even be like a wooden or stone something around your hand. So let's make these a little more delicate and make this guy bigger. And then I was also thinking about doing some grooves here, maybe. I mean, I don't know that that really helps. Maybe if we kind of curl the thumb around so it actually looks more like a literal fist. That's kind of nice. So the other thing would be I could just put knuckles up there like that. That looks kind of weird too. I don't know. Kind of like the way this is looking. What do you guys think? Between the gauntlet and the claws and so on. I mean, usually a gauntlet will have other kind of protective plates and, grooves between everything. But I'm kind of limited in how much detail I want to show here. I mean, something like that might be a little better, like actually having these separate kind of finger pieces, so it looks like a knuckled gauntlet. And kind of right now it looks like it's pinching something. We've got a little something is pinching in here, pinching a nut or a pea, which isn't really desirable. But